I want to ask, what are the differences between Christian Zionism and Jewish Zionism, and who is leading the other? I could answer the first part of that question. The second part of that question, I think, is a little bit more nuanced. The main difference, a very reductive difference between Christian Zionism and Jewish Zionism is the religious nature, okay? Because Christian Zionism was actually originally part of Christian mythology, and it really wasn't tied to, like, when I say it wasn't tied to politics, it wasn't tied to any financial backing by political entities, either individuals, organizations, or even specifically political parties. So Christian mythology has, for about 1,500 years now, had a facet of it focused on the end times through this lens of Christian mythology called dispensationalism, popularized by John Nelson Darby in I think it's the late 1800s, late 1800s. But dispensationalism is essentially this idea that the Bible is broken up, God's divine word of law is broken up into these distinct historical time periods called dispensations, and that the final dispensation or time period that the Bible outlines is actually prophetic and not historical. And what I mean by that is it's talking about something that's happening in the future and not recording something that's happened in the past. So the final dispensation is referred to as Armageddon, the end times. We've heard a lot about that. I've talked a lot about that on my channel as far as the end of the world being prophesied through the book of Revelation. And through that part of Christian mythology, which at first was such a very small minority of Christianity, it only had a small minority of Christians adhering to it. But once it started gaining political / financial backing, it grew in power and the numbers of adherents, right? So Christian Zionism versus Jewish Zionism is more religious in nature. It is tied to the theology and the doctrine of a specific religious belief system. My understanding, of course, I grew up as a Christian Zionist. I grew up as a Christian Zionist. I did not grow up as a Jewish Zionist. My understanding is that Jewish Zionism is actually specifically secular / political in nature, and it's not tied to the religion of Judaism at all. That's my understanding. And so I think that's the key difference between Jewish and Christian Zionism. As far as when they joined in the sense that they both became political, the beliefs of Zionism at all joined into this mass political movement in order to justify the occupying statehood of Israel at all genocidal costs. My understanding is that it was around the 70s. Well, it was actually in the 1948 and the 1967 movements of Israel, of Israeli forces in the land of Palestine. Those two time periods are when evangelical Christians in the United States really latched on to the fact that the God's chosen people, the Jewish people, returning to the land of Israel is fulfilling end time prophecy. And so that's when they really latched on to this idea. And the money, again, the political / financial backing of Christian Zionism really took off in the 70s, I believe. And so that is how we got to where we are today.